word MacBook usually brings one thing to mind: premium, high performance, sleek design, and, let's be honest, a high price tag. But now, Apple's strategy might be shifting in a way that could shake up the entire laptop industry. Rumors are pointing to something almost no one saw coming: a new MacBook, one that's not a Pro, and not even an Air, just MacBook. And this one could cost only $649. Let's slow down and unpack this. The last time Apple sold a regular MacBook was back in 2017. It was sleek, ultra-portable, and frankly a little underpowered. Apple quietly discontinued it in 2019. Since then, the only options have been the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro. But now, after 6 long years, this budget-friendly laptop might be making a comeback. And it's not just a small update. What's coming is a potential game-changer. The first major clue came from back-end Apple intelligence code discovered in the summer of 2024. A device identifier popped up, MacBook 171, which didn't match anything Apple currently sold. At first, many people were confused. The last MacBook used the identifier MacBook 101. So why such a big jump? Well, it actually makes sense. All Macs running an M4 chip have an identifier in the 16, so jumping to 17.1 might point to a completely new generation. Now here's the twist. According to trusted analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, this new MacBook won't use an M-series chip. Nope. Instead, it could be powered by the same chip as the iPhone 16 Pro, the A18 Pro. Let that sink in. A MacBook running on an iPhone chip. So why would Apple do this? Isn't that going backwards in terms of power? Not exactly. While the A18 Pro isn't built for heavy multitasking like the M-series chips, it's still a beast in its own right. Geekbench scores show that its single-core performance matches, or even beats, Apple's own M3 chip, and it's no slouch. In multi-core, either not far behind the original M1 chip. For most people, that's already more power than they need. Think about it, how often are you really maxing out your CPU? If you're just browsing, writing, watching videos maybe, doing light photo editing, the A18 Pro will handle all that like a breeze. And here's the thing, Apple knows this. Most people don't need pro-level performance. They want battery life, portability, and affordability. And speaking of memory, here's another interesting clue. Apple could pair the A18 Pro with either 8GB or 16GB of RAM. Which direction will they go? That's a tough call. On one hand, the iPhone 16 Pro only uses 8GB of RAM. But with the launch of Apple Intelligence, things have changed. Apple recently increased the base RAM in many of its MacBooks to 16GB to support those new AI features, so there's a chance they'll do the same here. Or maybe they'll keep it at 8GB to save costs and keep the MacBook Air looking more premium. Now let's talk design. That's where things get really interesting. Apple has 3 paths they could take. First, they might recycle the design of the old M1 MacBook Air. You know, that classic wedge-shaped chassis. Apple loves reusing old designs for budget products. Just look at the iPhone, say. It helps them save on R&D and keeps costs low. Second, they could give it the newer flat-edged look introduced with the M2 MacBook Air. But here's a fun idea. What if they brought back the ultra-thin profile of the original 12-inch MacBook? That would make sense for a low-powered, fanless device. It could be the thinnest and lightest MacBook Apple has ever made. No matter which design they choose, Apple will likely cut a few corners to separate this MacBook from the Air. For example, the display might not be as bright. Expect something around 400 nits like the original M1 MacBook Air, instead of the 500 nits we see on newer models. Maybe thicker bezels too, and probably no notch. Again, all of this is to create space between this entry-level model and the more expensive Air. And what about ports? That's still a mystery. But if Apple reuses the M1 Air chassis, we'll probably get to USB-C ports and a headphone jack. No Thunderbolt, of course. The A18 Pro doesn't support that. If they go with a newer design, maybe they'll throw in MagSafe charging. But that's still up in the air. Next up, colors. And this is where it gets fun. Reports say Apple might launch this MacBook in silver, blue, pink, and yellow. Sound familiar? Yep. Those are the same vibrant colors used on Apple's entry iPads. It makes perfect sense. Apple loves using playful colors to attract younger users. It gives the product a more fun, less serious vibe, and that fits this MacBook's role perfectly. Okay, let's get into storage. The iPhone 16 Pro ships with 128GB space storage, but for a laptop, that's cutting it close. Apple hasn't sold a MacBook with 128GB since 2019, so expect at least 256GB of storage here. But there's a catch. Apple might only use a single NAND chip instead of 2. That would make the SSD cheaper but also slower. We've already seen this trick with the M2 MacBook Air. Read and write speeds were nearly cut in half. Not ideal, but it keeps the price down. Now, here's where things get exciting. Battery life. iPhone chips are designed to sip power. They're way more efficient than even the M-series chips, which means this MacBook could last a long time on a single charge. We're talking all-day use, maybe even 2 days for light users. But Apple might not want this MacBook to outshine the Air in battery life. so they could shrink the battery slightly to keep things in check. Still, expect excellent efficiency. What will it be called? Some people are guessing MacBook, say, but that seems unlikely. Apple already has a name for its entry-level laptop. Just MacBook. Clean, simple, familiar. There's no need to confuse people with another, say, product. Now the question everyone's been asking: the price. How much will this cost? Well, the current M4 MacBook Air starts at $999, but it's often on sale for $849. That means this new MacBook needs to be even cheaper. Remember, Walmart has been selling the M1 MacBook Air for just $649. That's probably the sweet spot Apple is targeting. Somewhere between $649 and $799. That would make it one of the most affordable MacBooks in years, maybe ever. So when's it coming? Based on reports, Apple could unveil this new MacBook either at the end of 2025 or early 2026. That lines up with their usual spring event cycle, where they often announce more affordable products like the iPhone, say, or budget iPads. It would also come just in time to fill the gap left by the delayed M5 MacBooks. And finally, what's the big picture here? Why is Apple doing this? It's simple. They want to reach more people. Students, casual users, people who want a Mac but can't afford a $1,000 laptop. With this move, Apple could dominate the entry-level market. Think about it: a $649 MacBook with excellent battery life, a solid display, modern software, and the Apple ecosystem. That's a compelling offer. Sure, it won't be for power users, but for the average person it might be the perfect laptop. Light, fast, and simple. And once you're in the Apple ecosystem, there's a good chance you'll stick around. It's a smart move, and if this works, expect the rest of the industry to scramble to catch up. So that's everything we know so far about Apple's upcoming $649 MacBook, a blend of old ideas and new tech, a potential disruptor in the laptop world. And maybe, just maybe, your next laptop.